Hello, this is Inside News with Dale Matthews and Mike Jones. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Dale. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening, Dale.
It's good morning somewhere.
Yes, it is. That's right.
You ever get the feeling that the commissioners are sometimes not telling us the truth or that they're laughing at us behind our backs? See,
I have never had that experience, Dale. Please elaborate.
this little thing is making all the difference in the world, but they do forget sometimes that this camera is on and it's pointed at them. You asked us to keep track of them, and we do. And they just forget about that sometimes. Today was no exception. And their little meeting in the back room, well, it was amazing. Here in this picture is Cheryl Walker. Mike, you remember it was Dan DeYoung, the president of the city council, who was saying that those people out there who said no, the 80%, 78% that said no to the city sales tax still had their hand out, and he was getting tired of it.
Yeah.
And Cheryl Walker here is just, they're all laughing at you. They're laughing at us. They're laughing at us more than they are you, but they're laughing at you. Yes. Well, how many times, let me put it this way, Mike, what is Keith Heck's solid, solemn promise about an upcoming levy? What is he not going to do?
He is not going to support it in any way. This is what he has said. That's what he said in front of the city council here the other day, is that he wouldn't support it. He was not going to get on board with it. Now, that's only because he thinks that if he does, it's not politically good for him. It's not that he doesn't want that. Clearly he does, but I'm sure that you have some news on that front.
I do have some news on that front. But just before we go to that, what is it that Simon Hare said when we played back tape of Simon Hare saying, well, here's some political strategy of the right way to do the next levy. And we did a story about it. And then Simon Hare, unbidden, people are saying that I made it very, very clear. I was absolutely crystal clear. No way in the world.
Yeah. I don't know why it seems to be impossible for him to make that point in the back room back there. I mean, you'd think that that's okay. I mean, when they're in the back room back there, do they have to, I mean, do we need to talk about this like we're serious about it in some way? Just go, well, I don't care what you come up with. I'm not supporting it being on the ballot, and then that takes it down to two people. And if Keith said the same thing, then the whole thing is canned.
And Keith has said the same thing. But okay. Yes.
If they put this on the ballot, they put it on the ballot as a board, as an entire board.
Yes, they would. Okay, so when Cheryl Walker put something on today's agenda for the meeting in the little back room, and it said ballot, that she had something she wanted to put on the ballot, I said to Mike, there's no way that this is her 4-layered pizza levy. It can't be that, because the other commissioners said no, it can't be that. So it's probably some kind of ordinance, because she's kind of ordinance happy, okay, and really wants ordinances. So it's not going to be that. It just can't be that. And guess what it was? It was that. What?
Yeah.
They want to put this on the levy, on the ballot. Let me be sure that I did something I never do. I gave up some of our competitive advantage. Oh, no, not that. Yeah, well, I like beating the other guys to the punch. I like it when we're first. I called Channel 5. I talked with the KOBI. I talked with the news director. I like the guy. They don't cover stories sometimes, but I called him and I said, look, here's what's happening, because it's more important that the news gets out than that we're first. Although it's kind of important to me that we're first, and that when you watch this, you're getting the news before anybody else. But yeah, I also talked with Eder Campusano over at the Courier, and I said, you did catch this, right? Because there were like 5 stories. There usually aren't any, but there were about 5 stories from today's little backroom meeting. And he didn't get the others, but he did hear this one. And I said, I think it's important that you know this, 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 and this. Oh, well, he doesn't know that. Okay, whatever. So when Cheryl put this on the agenda, I didn't think there was no way they were going to be talking about putting this on the ballot because the other two have been so clear. Let me just do one more thing before we play the tape, and we'll mostly let it run. That way you get a chance to see it, and you don't need to listen to me. Oh, I hate it listening to him. And that is, it reminds me of an analogy. Oh, Margie's talking about another analogy. Yeah. When you're married to somebody and you're loyally married to that person, no matter how attractive somebody else may be to you, you're not going to end up in a hotel room with them. No matter when you're a loyal employee of the citizens, no matter how attractive a strip joint might be, you're not going to go there and get drunk. You're just not going to do that because you have integrity. So if you were, no matter, even if you don't do anything with that person, you don't end up with a hotel room with them or a motel room with them. So the fact that the commissioners are in this little back room and none of them said, oh, yes, I'm totally on board with you, Cheryl. But they're like talking about, well, you know, we could study that. And yes, they're in the motel room. This is not integrity. Let's see the tape.
Whoops. That's me in the dark. Hang on just a second.
They accuse us of that many times, Mike.
We have 3 items that are delineated on the agenda, and that pertains to Commissioner Walker's input.
Yes. The first one being the ballot proposal, which I had brought up, I believe it was in November, and said that I would postpone it until the first of the year. Has to do with the menu item type of levy proposal, where we would put each item separately where people could choose which ones they wanted to support. And so in bringing that back, we have a time frame in which we would have to prepare that to put it on the ballot if we so chose to do that.
At that time frame, February 26th.
Yes, it's the end of February, but we would have to get the written, get the ballot titles, you know, we can't wait till February to do it. So my recommendation would be just very, very short description of what it would be, that, as an example, not necessarily what it is, but say it's 30 cents for the jail. It would be on there, 30 cents levy per thousand goes strictly to the jail. No other use, et cetera, whatever legal language would have to be with it. Then the next one would be, say it's 22 cents for patrol. You know, I'm just pulling numbers. These are not actually representative of what they might be.
Who does the numbers?
What I would do is I would work with, and I've actually asked Arthur in our finance department, he has those, and he said, yes, he could do that.
We have varying levels.
We have varying levels, and he already showed what we had back in 2012 as to what, you know, because that was the last time we had the fairly good level. It wasn't the full level, but a fairly good level of public safety.
Please help with that year.
Right. So he gave me those as kind of a benchmark.
Right.
So using that benchmark, I could work with finance to determine what would be, as well as with the sheriff, as to what would be appropriate for a jail. I could work with, if we do juvenile justice, I could work with the juvenile justice department to see how that would work. So that is the proposal, to come up with realistic numbers, put them on the ballot, so that way people would not be questioning as to whether, well, if you say you're going to get $1.49, are you going to put so much here and then transfer some over, or whatever? Even though the reasoning behind that particular proposal, which was like, I believe 2 years ago or something, was that if somebody got a large grant, we could then take that money and, you know, supplement another department within public safety. But this is totally
that happens with the.
You know what's interesting here is, it's clear that Simon Hare, having gone and gotten drunk and gotten a DUI, clearly does affect his ability to operate in his job, because I'm watching him here and, you know, I'm imagining being in the position that he's in with, you know, diminished
Brain cells?
gravitas,
Oh,
shall we say?
okay.
You know, where you know, it's not, he's not going to be forcefully pushing a point at any time soon in this situation. I mean, he's subjugated himself by doing that, and you know, and this is one of the reasons why you can't stay if you're going to be, you know, if you either drink and make that your life, or be the commissioner and live that one, you know. But
A couple other things to
can't
note.
do both.
One is, did you notice the new and improved Simon hair? He's clean shaven. He doesn't look like his recent selfies, the pictures you take of yourself and then post on your Facebook site.
Oh yeah, thanks, because no one knows what that means.
There are a few people that may not know what that means. Sorry, I know what it means. You know what it means.
For
Okay.
crying out loud, that most of us.
Okay. And now he looks more like the picture that the Courier has been touting of him that was from several years ago. Now he looks like he's tanned, rested, and ready. Everything's fine. You know, he's already been through rehab. And now, how did he get to this meeting? Well, I asked him, but he didn't answer. He didn't even acknowledge the fact I asked him the question. I was nice about it. But how did he get to this meeting?
He looks like a dark-haired Dennis the Menace is what I'm wanting to think. That's the image.
Now, also note, because we're going to come back to this, not tonight, but on another night. She just said that in 2012, we had a pretty good level of, just remember that date, 2012, because we're going to show you what they all said, what the sheriff said and what the commissioners at the time, including Simon Hare, said about the levy of police support in 2012. And she just said that was pretty good. And they're all going, yeah, that was pretty good. That's not what they said to sell the 2012 levy. They said everything was going to hell in a handbasket. But now they're saying, oh, that was pretty good. Okay, so just note that. And one other thing is, this is exactly the point. They have now let Cheryl Walker say her thing. Here's the point at which everyone should say, no, madam, I'm not going to that motel with you. What they should have said is, no, I've made it clear. I made a promise to the people. I've gotten up in public and I've been indignant about it. And I told people I'm not going to do. And so that's really enough. We don't need to hear any more. We're not supporting this. But that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the one person can't speak for the other naysayer on the board there, but they could certainly say, whoops, hang on a second here.
They could say, hey, I've heard it. That's enough. Don't need to hear it anymore.
They could just say, you know, I don't know, you know, what you're thinking of here, but I'm not in support of it. And then the other person could then pipe up and say, yeah, I'm not in support of it either. So, you know, you feel free to take, you know, however much time you want to make this presentation, but nobody's buying here. You know, and make that clear, because
they made a promise to the people. They said it to us indignantly and shaking their finger. I'm not going to do it. Well, they're liars.
Well, and it's interesting because somehow they have the impression that when they're in the back room, that they're not in front of the public.
Yeah, but this is why I held this up, because I'm pointing this at them.
Yes, and more people, you know, and in case any of you guys are watching this tonight, more people are seeing you now by about, you know, probably double at least than you see in a weekly business session.
Oh, much more than that. If it was just double, we'd just give up.
So just understand that, you know, I mean, just because you're doing it in the back room here doesn't mean, you know, the public who you've sworn oath to serve aren't watching. That's just silly.
This is the kind of thing. Well, just like this. Do you think that she had any idea when she was laughing at the citizens and their vote that we were looking at her, you know, doing this? It's smirking like this. This is a real definition of smirking here.
Well, you know what, and it's funny because when the city's cameras are catching it, they're looking at the faces of each of these people, and you know, you don't catch that always from you know, when you're sitting in the audience and you're, you know, maybe getting a profile of somebody.
Oh, they know that too. They know it. This is one of the reasons why they wanted to get us out of the way, so we couldn't hear, and so we'd be way over in a corner. You got tiny little dots of people.
I'm telling you, that clip, we should just fish that up every once in a while and just play it. Remember these guys? Here they are. There's each one of these guys is still in office, because that one there just shows who they are, and it shows, how dedicated they are to serving us.
It definitely does. So let's hear more in their own
Okay.
words. Now, you might think, oh, well, you're being too critical just because they're not jumping up. Listen to how they now participate in doing some strategy planning with Cheryl Walker, and then you'll listen later, and this is going to happen in the Ann Basker Auditorium and other places. Why, I always said I was against. No, you didn't. Here we go.
Justice reinvestment dollars that the legislature passed, that was a significant amount of money that came into the criminal justice system that was not anticipated. Nobody could foresee the prison population was escalating to a point, and the legislature elected to, rather than forego opening up the junction, it's the east side facility over there that's already built, ready to go. They reinvested those dollars in local communities to curb the prison population. Nobody could anticipate that.
Right,
So,
and that happens occasionally where a department will get a large grant, whether it's, $500,000 or $1 million. Well, then why should they be flush, so to speak, or have surplus when we could take that money then and put it over in juvenile justice or criminal justice or whatever. So anyway, being that or patrol, whatever, that was the whole idea behind that. However, that being said, if we do one where it's exclusively that's where that money goes, that's it. And of course, all of us sitting here know that to anticipate any further secure rural schools is folly at this point, because no one's in Congress is working on it. If they're not working on it, it's not going to happen. So anyway, that is the proposal, and I would like to know if that's something that you want pursued or not for the May ballot.
do you have a duration of time of the proposal?
I'm sorry?
Like, is it 3, 4, 5 year?
That would have to be decided by this board, so whether we would want to do it for 3
You don't have
years.
it set?
No, I have
And
not.
there's
No, I have not said that.
says-
And it may be that some of them we may want to do some for 3 years, or some for 5 years, or some for 2 years, or, because of the differences in the departments, we may want to do that, but I don't know. I mean, that would be something that this board would have to decide. My personal opinion is that the minimum should be 3 years, because if you're going to be hiring new personnel, you don't want to say, well, we're hiring you for 1 year, and then you're off again. So I think a minimum of 3 years would be appropriate if you're going to be hiring, particularly when you're hiring highly trained individuals, such as deputies, where the training is expensive and takes a long time. You don't want to train them, have them work for 1 year, and they're gone.
One of the significant factors is the fact that our jail bond isn't fully paid for. Our jail isn't fully paid for until the bond is satisfied, and that's done June 30th of 2018. Yeah, that's correct. And so to shut down the jail because of our financial situation, I think that really needs to be explicit out there, that X plus Y doesn't get you there. There is no fundamental way with the expiration of secure rural schools. We'll get our last payment this spring. I wrote this up for the presentation to state of the county for people to, and the subsequent legislation that's led to this. So,
I got a question. I'd like to know, because they often refer to the expiration of secure rural schools as though this is rock solid, it's dead set, it's going to happen, that's it, it's done. And, it's been talked about here, and here, and that's something that can be referenced. I would like to know, what is it they're referencing specifically? Where is it talked about? Where is it documented? I want to know this, because they talk about it as though it's a foregone conclusion.
And the logic they use to try to sell this scary thing to us is that nobody in Washington, D.C. right now is talking about next year. And we've already said why, because they gave us 2 years.
Right.
So they're not talking about next year.
Yeah, but they reference this enough to, I mean, I'd really like to ask the question and see what they have to say. Can you tell me, when did they telegraph that 2017, that's it, it's done?
They haven't, because they've taught. I go to all their meetings, and there's no evidence of that right
Well, these
now.
guys haven't, but they reference it all the time,
They
and
do.
they talk to I mean the city council references this 2017 cutoff point all the time as well.
But
And
this isn't the first year that they've done
Al
that.
Gore said that the New York City was going to be underwater probably about 10 years ago, but it doesn't make any difference. I mean, I want to know. I mean, if there is some document out there that says it, I'd like to know about it.
But the problem is, I understand your point. The problem is, they say this every year. Well, we know SRS is going out. Well, we certainly know it's being cut off. Well, certainly this is the last year for secure rural schools. Well, no, this is the last year. Nope, this is the last year. They say it every year.
They say it every year. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's
maybe this is the last year. But once they say it every year, it's the boy who cries wolf. Now they're saying, well, it's going to be 18 months because we're giving it for 2 years. But every year they say exactly the same thing. Is there any new evidence? Well, they haven't said but they're absolutely convinced that this is the end. Why are they absolutely convinced? Because they want to be absolutely convinced. Because remember I was telling you about that meeting where the senator came to Cave Junction, and he was told by Don Reedy, stop telling us this good news about the renewal of SRS payments because we're trying to pass a levy. Don't tell people this.
Yeah. I just have a bit of an issue with it. If I'm pretty clear on the ONC Act and what it says and what the requirement of but something happened in the early 90s there, and I'm not really up on all of that changed how everything was.
Yeah, they decided to not really honor the contract.
Right. But I mean, what is the documentation? I've heard people referencing the Northwest Forest Plan or something like that.
Western Oregon, WOPR, Western Oregon.
Well, whatever it is that has made it so that they are going to be able to shut off funding altogether and not honor. I mean, they're going to have to pass some sort of legislation that completely negates the ONC Act. They're going to have to do that because they can't really, I just need to know more about that. That's all.
This is the discussion I had with the Courier today, because I called the guy and I said, okay, you heard this. Just want to be sure if you want any stuff, you can watch tonight's show. We've got it recorded. You can see for yourself. You can get exact quotes. Please, you're welcome to it. I said the same thing to Channel 5. I said, we've got all this. You can listen to what they say and not say. I just want to make it absolutely sure that at Channel 5, they did not say, we're all on board. We're definitely doing this. That's not what they said. But they've gone from adamant opposing to sort of half-hearted opposing to now just sort of sitting there listening and coming up with ideas about how to make it better, but doing it. So, I mean, the trend is definitely toward, okay, this is what we're going to do. That's one of the things we do is we look at trends, not just, what the official press release is. If you want that, dig up Jim Moore and he'll write it for you, okay? But what we've done is, what we're doing here is we're saying, this is not half-hearted opposing. This is like, okay, well, here's how this could happen. Look, Eder asked me, he said, well, but what about the SRS payments going away? And so I said to him what we've been saying on the show, do you really think that senators and congresspeople from other states, maybe they don't like our state, maybe they hate Oregon more than any other place in the world, more than Florida, okay? And they're going to take half of the state and make sure that we go out of business and that we all go belly up and that we have to declare bankruptcy for half of a state. How are they going to explain that to the rest of the nation, that the reason that we've gone out of business is because they're not paying their bills?
But there are those who would spin that as, well, you guys, knowing that this was going to come, didn't take steps to take care of yourself by paying more in property taxes.
And the reason we didn't is because we're supposed to have, it's like an annuity, right? We're supposed to have this annuity. And the bank says, well, I know we're supposed to pay a certain amount every year, but you really need to cut back. Why do we need to cut back? It's an annuity. It's a contract with the bank, from my parents who gave me the money. They didn't give me any money, but congratulations to you that got it. And we're supposed to get this. Yeah, but we're cutting it back, and we're going to eventually cut it back to zero. Under whose authority are you going to do that? This is an annuity that you signed a solemn contract with us, and you're not. So what would any of the opposition from ONC or from Simon Hare or from Fibber McGee, why would anyone be going up against the federal government? Because they're breaching their contract.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether we're throwing it away or what, we're eating it. It doesn't matter. We have a contract. They're not living up to it.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right.
However,
okay, but the contract that we say that they're not living up to is the ONC Act. But there was something that happened there in the mid-90s, whether they just announced to us we're going to be cutting you back a certain amount a year and you're just not going to get any more after that. And part of the reason is it has to do with the fact that, there's spotted owls there and we can't harvest there anymore because that would be bad for the spotted owl. And so, I mean, this being the rationale, the ONC Act still in place, but because of the fact that we can't go in there and cut for the preservation of this owl, and that is the reason why. I mean, I'm speculating, of course, because I don't really know. Right. I need to look more at that, but I mean, if that's the case, it's been proven pretty definitively that the whole spotted owl thing was a complete farce.
Well, they're not going to buy into that because they need to get reelected. So using the same logic, the idea that they're not going to buy into that because they need to get reelected, imagine them trying to run for reelection when they're part of their legacy. We've talked about Cheryl and Keith trying to develop a legacy for themselves so they get reelected. Part of the legacy of Congress is, would you like it on your record that the reason that half of a state went out of business. Half of a state went bankrupt because you're not paying your bills, whether you want to pay them or not. Who wants to pay a bill? But there's integrity involved here, and if they're not obeying that's going to be hard to sell that to the rest of the country.
Yes, I understand that, Dale. That's one way of looking at it. But you know what? Do you think that our two Democratic senators would likely be thinking in the same way that you are, or would they say, would they contact people in the state there and say, listen, you need to do the $2 bill and force that down the throats of these people because we need to cut you off because we need the slush money somewhere else?
That's certainly a possibility. And then what we need to do is get rid of those senators if that's what they do, because we have a contract.
Right.
And the people here are saying, let's hold them to the contract. Where's our activity to hold them to the contract? When are we going to hold them to the contract?
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah, well, it's not with this group, because Cheryl says
it's frustrating.
It's too scary to her to even do that you can't even send a letter. And
but Dale, how could they possibly believe that somehow this little pieces of a levy are somehow a legacy building vehicle when there's no way? I mean, they know. I mean, it's been shown to them on a number of occasions that this is not popular in the county. Simon is facing a recall, and if the signatures come in on time, do you think that he is going to be supporting this at the same time? Because those two things sort of coincide. Very similar timing.
They do. Well, I've got the answer. Okay. For the exact same reason that we caught the city council laughing about how stupid 80% of the voters are. And they did. This is not an exaggeration. They were laughing about it. That's what she's smirking about. Because somehow that satisfy their relationship with the Rotary Club. I mean, they're solid with 20% of the county, but they're laughing about it and congratulating each other about what a great job they did representing us, but we were just too stupid to follow our instructions.
It is unbelievable that
but they're doing it.
Yeah, they're doing it. They're doing it, but
they're doing it with a vengeance, literally with a vengeance.
Yeah, right. It is true, but you know what? This is the political disconnect, and we're seeing this on a national level. And listen, I just so you know, people, I'm not a Trumpster. Okay, I'm not one of these people, but the reason why he is getting massive crowds and is very, very popular is because he is nothing like those other people. You know, when when he's describing something and he needs to, throw out a piece of common man profanity in order to sell it, he does, and people go crazy. They don't. He doesn't parse words and things like that. These people here, even though their solid core is the 20%, they somehow believe that they have their finger on the pulse of the county or something like that. It's so weird.
It is weird. The thing that we've been saying on this show, and I'm in such a strange position because I decided to run also, and that's just it's really screwing me up in many ways and trying to say things to you. But one of the things about this is when you're looking at the various candidates, my personal opinion is if you've got somebody that's half-hearted, don't vote for them. What are you doing? Because they're just going to get sucked into this, because you've seen that happen with others. If you've got someone that's got a background where they've always voted for something, don't vote for them now. Well, maybe I'll change my mind. That's not good enough, buddy. Or you got, under certain circumstances. What circumstances? You're going to go up against the rest of the voters in the county that have said what they wanted for the last 15 years, and there might be certain circumstances? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I think that it's pretty clear. And most people, at least the polls seem to indicate it whenever we have elections, which seems to be every 6 months around here, that the majority of the county is not on board with your we need some more of your money bandwagon there. So I don't understand why you keep coming back to that. Perhaps it's, and we've talked about this a number of times, that maybe they think that if they're the one who finally gets a levy passed, that they will have saved the county and they'll be lauded from, everywhere they go. They'll never buy their own drinks again.
Well, very interesting you say never buy your own drinks again, because I do not have this from two sources. I'm sorry. So this is just anecdotal, but so were the 5 people who said that before Doug Deacon stepped forward. Okay. And you know who he is. Not going to explain that. And Simon Hare had said to someone, according to this single source, it's a source I trust, but it wasn't me and it wasn't Mike, said that Simon Hare was bragging at a bar that he's going to be the first commissioner in a generation that got a levy passed.
Okay.
So it is
I'm sorry,
it's going to cement their legacy.
Just a point of clarification. What's the dating on this anecdote?
I don't know if he was dating anybody, Mike, but that was when he was first running for office. That was 5 years ago. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
He was sure that's going to be his legacy. Now, Cheryl got a big blow to her legacy last night because this thing, the citizens, whether they're right or wrong, said, we don't want that helicopter thing in IV. And she was fit to be tied, buddy. And that would have been today's story, except for this. Instead, there were like 5 things today that were pretty important. And that was like number 2 or 3. But this thing with the levy, of course, we're playing this instead. In fact, we're going to try to play a little more of it. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes.
Federal schools has expired as of October 1st, 2015. We're on shared receipts this next year. The proposal under the RMP, what we have right now, we may generate $1.5 million, $2 million. It's really hard to tell, but it'll probably be somewhere around that number and declining as the adoption of the new plan comes out. It's not the same level as it was before. It'll likely be less.
All right. So what's he talking about?
I don't know.
This is the adoption of the new plan. What's the new plan?
See, they're always saying this
Yeah.
kind of stuff, and whatever the answer is, and it keeps changing. And I see this all the time. Every time he's coming up with a bunch of stuff, and you're going, where the heck did that come from? Because it fits with the narrative that, well, we're likely not to get it. Notice how careful that they are. He is about this. The others aren't careful at all. But he always says, well, you know, we've got this and this and this, and that's a lot of money, and $1.5 million here, and $1 million there, and $3 million there. But it's likely not to happen. But see, every year it does happen. Now, obviously, not everything is going to be happening that's just lovely and great, but he's been saying this for 5 years. Well, the ONC, here's your other thing. The ONC is they're really going to get their act together for 5 years, and they're going to send a letter for 5 years, and they're going to do this for 5 years.
Yeah.
It always looks like I'm so ready. They're going to come up with great plans for Josephine County.
I want to know, and listen, if you're watching out there and you know what we pay to be a member of the member of the ONC counties organization association of ONC counties, if you know what we're paying for that, write us a letter, badcounty@cpros.com. Also, if you happen to know anything that they've done for us, since forever, why don't you write and tell us about that too?
I hear them say the numbers all the time. I didn't know you were going to ask that question, or I would have come prepared to tell you how much we spend, because that's a matter of public record, and I may even be able to ask any of them how much do we pay, and they're proud of the amount that we pay, because we pay the same amount, I understand, as most other counties, if not all other counties, and we're holding up our end of the bargain, although we're not getting anything out of it that we can identify.
So it might be a little harder to get the information on what they've done for us lately.
Oh, yeah, I think that might be a little bit harder. That was one of the things that Simon talked about at this meeting, but it wasn't the first thing. The first thing, there's only so much time in the show, and we've got to go with our lead story, which is that the commissioners are not even pretending like they're going to pass it off to somebody else now.
And let's continue, because we're losing continuity here.
So that would be the high number, and we'll be going down from there. The prognosis isn't good for us to even be able to keep the jail open until we're paying off.
Well, we're minimally able to keep it open now.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been supplemented by the city for 2 years.
Right.
It's minimal.
So,
but
for that, we wouldn't have had it.
And that's 15.2 cents per thousand that everybody's paying for that will be off their tax bills. And in that November of 18.
The bond is 15.
Mm-hmm. It's about 15.
Right.
Well, and my concern is that this whole criminal justice system is an integrated organism. It's not isolated one-on-one. So if you increase the deputies, and so who is going to adjudicate their arrests if we don't have more district attorneys? It's just this idea that this is not a singularity item. This is an enmeshed item across the spectrum.
I think we have.
Okay. This is a super important point. This is the first time that Keith has said anything. I thought he was going to come in and say, well, wait a minute. I've already promised the people. I promised them in no uncertain terms. So he asked a really important question. Well, but wait a minute. If you break this up into little menu items, what if people say, well, we want more patrols, which they're most likely to do? Then what are we going to do with the DA's load? Well, keep in mind that the DA and his salary and all that's paid by the state, but we'll pretend like we're paying everything for that. Okay. Just going to pretend, because it's not true. So it's a real good question. What Cheryl's going to answer here, and the reason I'm coming in before she says it is so that you see that this is right. People are going to think that, okay, if we set aside a certain amount for sheriff's patrols, that will be in addition to what we now have. So we're not going to end up replacing what we now have with something else, which is, in the opinion of some people, not enough. So here's this is the weak point of this entire argument. Keith put his finger on one part of it, but the other part of it is, okay, it's just in little bits and pieces. What if we choose the wrong bit or 2 bits and we need 3? Okay. Here's the weak point of the whole thing, so you can tell your neighbors. The weak point is, what she wants to do is, if you take this amount of money and you put into this, then you're going to take part of that money or all of that money and put it into something else. And so that way you think that you're voting for this.
Yeah, that's right.
But you're actually voting to put money over here.
Yeah.
And so when she's saying, no, what's really good about this and what's super terrific about this, and they're all going to agree, even Keith is going to agree because he's not listening to his own argument. What's great about this and what makes it so unique and a totally different kind of levy, that's why I'm saying it now, is that you're guaranteed that the money's going to go to the right place. Well, let's suppose that was true. It's never been true in the past, but let's suppose that for the very first time that they're honorable people and they do what they say they're going to do, and they don't say, let's keep the numbers purposely vague, okay? And all of that 30 cents or whatever goes into patrols. But they're going to take the money that's in there already and decide to pass that around among other people, so he's really not going to get that. So then one final thing. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead. One final thing is, then she comes up with the idea, well, what if we gave them 50 cents instead of 30 cents, and then they'd have more, and then we could take that 30 cents out, and that'll be more than what they have now, and then we'll give that 30 cents to somebody else. It ends up being the same thing. They're playing with the money behind the scenes. Mike, sorry.
Yeah. Well, and really what this comes down to is that they feed the funding of these departments out of the general fund. So if they are, if they get these, funding for, specified for the jail, specified for, juvenile justice, specified for whatever, then they can pull back what they would normally fund out of the general fund to that degree, or maybe slightly less than that degree, or whatever. And you're right, it's another way of juggling funds around. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter what they propose. It's these guys that are administrating it, and that's really the issue.
That's where the shell game comes in, because if it was a bunch of honest people, and if we'd been doing show after show after show, illustrating how honest they were, you might say, okay, if they've got 30 now, and we're going to give them a 30 more, or then they would end up with 60. And they would say, yes, that's right, we're not going to take money out. But that's not the way it's going to work. You put the 30 in, and they take that 30 out, or you put 50 in, and they take 30 out, then that 30 is going to go to something else that you didn't vote for. Oh, you see, there's going to be, with this group, there's always going to be a dishonest shell game behind it, and that's the shell game.
Yeah.
Let's let them explain it until we run out of time.
9 DAs right now, don't we?
Yeah.
Didn't we have 9 in 2012?
Our high was 11 when I took office.
So that's been 6 years. So we're not that much less than what we had before.
I think he was just giving an illustration. Yeah. A better illustration was if
but that particular one is one that we put questions.
Well, very logically, patrols could pass.
Yeah.
And yet the jail, like it hasn't passed before, it doesn't get funded.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Yeah.
I mean, you're citing and releasing people of major violations that really should be incarcerated. I don't know that the public right now, that's kind of happening, and that's one of the major things I hear is so-and-so, we know he stole this stuff. He gets cited, and he's released, and before the day is done, he's out stealing something else.
Yeah.
Well, my thought on that is that we're already putting money into the jail and to patrol, and if a levy passes for one and not the other, whatever was going into the jail could go to patrol. So we could, the money that we already have that we're working, so we could do that. Within public safety, since they would all be public safety types of questions. Yeah. So that
before we get too far away from the cite and release issue, when they're talking about you cite and release these people, is it because of diminished jail capacity or the inability of the cases to be adjudicated? What is the issue there? Because
a little of both.
Yeah, because
point. It's a legitimate point.
Yes, but hang on a second here. If indeed the DA's office is funded by the state, and they are not fully funded by the state, we pay a 20% bonus on top of what the state pays the DA's office for better service or something like that. But so if that's the case, if they're funded, then what is it that we're contributing in addition to the 20% bonus that we're giving them? What are we contributing to those cases?
That's a really good point, because two good points. One is, if we don't have a tough enough DA's office, part of the reason is because the state's not giving them enough money, because they get their money from the state, except for the last 20%. And so then if we say we're setting a certain amount aside for the DA, we're going to set aside more than that extra 20%? What's that about?
I don't get it. I want to know, okay, so we're too short. In other words, we're picking people up that we cannot put through the system. Is the shortfall in the DA's office, or is the shortfall in the ability to incarcerate them? What is the shortfall?
Let's start again with
okay, but if it's both, then what's the DA thing? Because if they are funded by the state, then there is no shortfall in the DA's office. So what is the truth?
Right. Supposedly, the fault is ours because we're not paying enough in taxes. But what's our role in this? In fact, there are many counties, they don't put anything extra in there, and the state funds their DA's offices to the amount they're supposed to be. So why isn't the state funding it the way it's supposed to?
Yeah,
because
listen,
we're not arguing with them about it. It's part of the problem.
I'm sure that I'm missing something here, because they quite often cite investigations and other things like that. Maybe there's something, maybe the assistant DAs we have to pay for, or whatever. I mean, I'm missing something here, because somewhere there's a disconnect. You pick a guy up for doing a major crime. Let's see, he stole something that cost $50,000. Okay. And you take him and you cite him and release him. And you can't put that guy in jail, or is that guy a higher priority? You put him in jail and kick somebody else out?
Well, how does this work? About this, because I have talked with the new DA and with his assistant. Okay, and here's the story that I got. They get their funding from the state, but in our county, the funding that they get from the state, forget about the 20% for a second. The funding that they get from the state is not adequate for the job that they have. It's adequate in many counties. It's not adequate in ours. Well, really?
Okay.
Why?
Wow.
I said, why? Well, that's just the way that it goes. That's just the way that it goes. That's not a quote, but I mean,
right.
We just have to live with that. We just have to live with that. So then the second question is, if we vote more money for the DA's office out of our pocket, when it's supposed to coming out of the state's pocket, is he going to get more than 20%? Is he going to get 25%, 30%, 35%? No, but I have the answer. The answer is, we're going to take the 20% that we were giving him. We're going to take that 20% out, and that's going to go back into the general fund to spend on something else. And then we're going to replace that 20% with this 20% that's now being funded directly by the people. And then the 20% that was in there, which wasn't enough, is going to be spent somewhere else.
Yes, I can see how that could certainly be done. But you know what? I want because I think this is a chink here in the armor, and so I want to know what the actual answer to this question is, because you know what, if you can't pick somebody up off the street, incarcerate them, and adjudicate their case, and then send them wherever they're going to go, then tell me why. Tell me why.
We have tried. I have tried, but let me just tell you this. There's plenty of people out there in the audience that are probably asking the same question that you're asking. So it just goes back to that same thing when people come up to me and they say, I would speak at the ambassador, but I don't know all the details. Whose fault is it that you don't know all the details? Do you think that Mike and I aren't trying to find out what the details are? Do you think that we don't care, that we don't go over these reports, that I didn't go in and talk with the DA?
Clearly I didn't go over it on this, because I don't know. I've been asking questions this whole show that I feel kind of stupid for not knowing.
If they want our support and giving us the money, then why aren't they saying it to us in a way that we can understand? I sat down and talked with the guy. You can't all do that and have everybody sit down and talk with the guy individually.
Right.
That's not going to happen. I spent about an hour with this guy and his assistant. Do you think I came back with something where I could tell you definitively this is exact? No. And now, why is that the case? Well, we just want the money. Yeah, but I know, but why aren't we getting the money from the state? Well, and it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense to me, and I've got a little bit of education. None of this is making any sense. And the reason it's not making any sense is because they're smirking at us. It doesn't need to make any sense. Just do what you're scripted.
They don't want it to be clear to us, because
No,
if it's
let's keep
clear
it
to
purposely
us,
vague.
then, yeah,
Sorry.
right, exactly. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay. Should we play any more of this, or are we done?
Let's not play any more of this. We'll pick up on this probably tomorrow and play a little bit more of this, or we'll try to play, the parts that you're going to find most interesting. Mike, we could be criticized for being too tough on them and saying, well, they should listen to all the opinions and maybe they shouldn't be held to what they promised. Tell me your opinion about that, would you please?
Well, listen, I understand why Cheryl's doing it, because, they praised her as the Levy god, and she feels like she has to deliver to her constituents, which aren't us. It's the city council and other people who love levies. And but the other two guys, I don't think they have a decent excuse for allowing this conversation to continue. I mean, if I was sitting there, I'd go, I appreciate that, you have something to do at night when you go home, thinking of all these things, but I'm not on board with it. And I just want to tell you that. And if we can take a poll here at the table, how many people are going to, at any point in the future, support this, even though the citizens say, no way, Jose, raise your hand. And then you'd have two people with their hands raised, and you'd go, okay, we're done here. I think we're done. Feel free to continue ad nauseum, and we'll give you 10 more minutes, and then we're going to move on to the next topic.
I had this same conversation with a prominent lawyer in town who's taken both stands. I'm totally for it. I'm totally against it. That kind of thing. Yeah. And he helped Pat Fahey and company write up the wording and check the legal aspects of the wording for a previous levy. And I said, now, why would you do that? Why would you help them check the legal aspects if you're not for it? Well, they asked me for help. I said, no. This is not what people do. I'm thinking of stabbing my wife tonight. Could you help me, sharpen my knife? Oh, sure, but I won't be involved in the actual stabbing. No, you don't do that. And so if you don't believe in something, you don't get involved in it. You certainly don't come up with strategy like they were doing here. And there's a lot more strategy to this. And Simon Hare is more guilty of it than Keith is, because Keith's mostly keeping quiet. I don't forgive him for that, right? Because he said clearly to us, to everybody, I'm totally against this. So now's the time, Keith. Don't laugh along with Cheryl Walker. Instead say, no, I made it clear. I made a promise to the people. No matter what my personal opinion, I'm not going to back this. In fact, you're talking to the wrong people here. You're not preaching to the choir. You're preaching to, something else. And I'm not going to, no. The answer is no. No is no.
Yeah. But at the same time, I kind of understand how this is coming about with this thing here, because they just a couple of weeks ago sat in a yuck, slap your knee, commiseration session with the counselors over there about this. And Cheryl feels like, they have an expectation that she is going to deliver for them. She must deliver for them. You must help us. Please help us, Cheryl.
That is what they said. Yeah, they said, if you guys don't do it, nobody will do it. That's right, because the next group of commissioners come in are not going to do this. And so they're desperate to get this thing passed and get it on the ballot.
Oh.
The thing is that these are city councilors who are desperate, even though 80% of the city voters said no. They're making fun of them. They're laughing at them. They're desperate to get it done anyway. And I bet they wish that they had just put it on and passed it, because as Mark Bartholomew, the city attorney, said, we didn't even need to put this to a vote. Why bother with the people? I mean, it's just America.